All right, well, good evening, everybody. It is September 21st, 2022. We made it halfway through the week. Obviously, there was no live stream yesterday because I was traveling, so we will be in Miami, Florida for the next couple of weeks. I have a golf event to go to, have a couple client meetings, but I'll fill you guys in on that in a moment. But first, most importantly, everybody, today was a very, very important day on Wall Street. Well, we heard from Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. Okay, and so tonight's stream is going to be about doing a deep dive into that speech at the conclusion of the FOMC meeting. Now, it's obvious the Federal Reserve decided to raise interest rates by about 75 basis points. But what I think is more important than the actual headline number or the interest rate that they raised by is the verbiage and some of the main quotations that were used by Fed Chair Jerome Powell. And I'd like to break that down in a very organized step-by-step fashion tonight. So if you guys want to follow along as well, if you type !Fed, F-E-D in the chat, I did program the Nightbot to drop the actual speech from Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Okay, so obviously, whenever the Fed Chair speaks after the FOMC meeting, there's Wall Street Journal articles, there's Bloomberg articles, CNBC articles, and that's all great. It's all well and good to read that stuff, but if you're serious about understanding the financial markets, understanding how monetary policy impacts the financial markets, not only for stocks, for real estate, and the labor market, it's absolutely critical to actually pay attention and to listen to the actual speech, okay? So we're gonna talk about that. If we take a quick look at futures, futures are down across the board. The S&P 500 down about 22 points. But during the day today, the S&P 500 fell about 66 points, or about 1.71%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average also falling about 522 points, making it off about 1.70%. And then the NASDAQ Composite also fell 204 points, or 1.79%. From a technical standpoint, all of the major indices are well below their respective 50 and 200-day moving averages, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average is only about 500 points off of the low in June. So with that out of the way, everybody, let me put away my computer and we'll get the stream started. We are starting from the 200 Southeast Financial Center here in downtown Miami, but we are going to be walking to Brickell. So let's see who we have in the chat. Just give me 2 seconds. Hopefully we don't go out because the elevator, we're on the 21st floor here. So let's see who we have in the chat, everybody. Hey, I see Dusty Cole, Sweet Country Living in Michigan is here. Good to see you. Jay is here. Mr. Braden, welcome. Good to see you guys. Dan Zhang says, hey, Tom, I felt a little weird last night without the stream. Yeah, it's we've been streaming almost every night. It's a very good time. Sunshine After Rain is here, says, welcome back to Miami. Good to see you, Sunshine. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Now, I just want to forewarn everybody, we may go out here because we have a very long elevator ride down. But here's just a quick look at the WeWork office. Lee is here, says, evening, Tom. Good to see you, Lee. Trust you're well. Carmen is here from California. Good to see you, Carmen. So I think these are some of the original, what is it called? Like the Pac-Man games or something like that. Nobody ever uses them. They just sit here and rot. But all right, team, let's head downstairs and I will see you on the other side. Hopefully we don't have any internet issues going down here, but a lot to talk about. Very, very important day, and I have a lot to share with you. So we'll go to the lobby here. All right, if we go out, I'll see you guys on the other side. We'll restart the stream. Hey, Brian is here, welcome. Daryl says, hello, Tom, from Chicago, Illinois. Welcome, good to see you. Ryan Royal, Mr. Fine Arts, good to see you. How are we doing on the internet in the elevator, everybody? Thumbs up, thumbs down on the internet? Sabrina Fair, welcome. Hey, War Walker, good to see you, my friend. Yeah, War Walker's like Tom's always the last one in the office. It's pretty nice. The investigator says hello, looks nice so far. Yeah, so we're finally back in Miami. This is the 200 Southeast Financial Center. I'll give you guys one more peek at the lobby here. Very nice place. But now we must head out. Oh, I think it's gonna rain. I don't have my umbrella. That's okay. Back on the ground floor. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Walks in Wall Street. Bob says, Tom, welcome back to Miami. Thank you, Bob. Much appreciated. So we do not have the microphone either tonight, everybody. So I just wanted to give a quick forewarning that if there's a lot of wind noise, I apologize. I have to go to the Apple store tomorrow, which is in the Brickell City Center. I just didn't have time to go today. I got to pick up my adapter. Dub says, greetings, everybody. Good to see you, Dub. So we have a lot of new people. So I don't think many of you have seen Miami so far. So I'll just give you a quick look. This is the Southeast Financial Center. And Citadel Securities actually has their satellite office right in this building on the 21st floor. So the entire second half of the WeWork building is allocated towards Citadel Securities. And it was a beautiful, beautiful day today in Miami. It was on and off rain though all day, which was kind of nice because it kept things a little bit cool. But tonight we are going to be walking around the downtown as well as Brickell area here in Miami. And we are going to be talking about the conclusion of the FOMC meeting. Yes, the FOMC meeting, which was a 2-day extravaganza, concluded today with Fed Chairman Jerome Powell giving his speech and setting the tone for monetary policy. So obviously we got a 75 basis point rate hike today. Here, I'll show you guys the Metro Mover. So here in Southern Florida, here in Miami, we obviously can't have subways because, I mean, for obvious reason of the flooding. So all of our public transportation has to be elevated. So it's kind of unique from being in New York and, you know, having the subways underground, and here you sort of have all the trains that snake through the buildings, which is cool. Hey, Big Tasks says, hey, Tom, I'm here. What's going on? I'm doing good, Big Task. Hopefully you had a good middle of the week so far. Big Talk is here. Says, hey. Brian says, just smash the like button. Cheese Truck says, Tom, how was your flight? So my flight was good. No complaints. You know, and we were talking about that CPI report that came out last week. And one of the only things that was positive about that report is that airfare is actually coming down. So I bought my flight probably about maybe 7 days before it took off. So I flew out of JFK, landed at Miami International Airport, and the flight was only like $106, which was great, which is fantastic because during all this inflation craziness, I was used to paying like $250, sometimes $300. So I guess that is a little bit of a bright spot. But if we look at pretty much every other category of the CPI report was really egregious. And that translates to what happened today when Fed Chair Jerome Powell essentially laid down the law. And what I took away from the speech is it's just not even a negotiation for a pivot. It's not going to happen. And essentially the party's over. That was really what I took away from the FOMC meeting or the speech today. So we'll talk about that. Now, once again, if you guys want to follow along, and if you want to, you know, allocate 40 minutes of your time, maybe tonight or tomorrow, to listen to that speech yourself, if you type !Fed, FED in the chat, I programmed the Nightbot to actually drop the unedited speech that Fed Chair Jerome Powell gave today. Hey, Jay is here. Good to see you. Sonny G. or Sunny D says Miami's so calm compared to New York City. It's definitely a big change, right? Definitely a major change between Miami and New York City. But it's good to be back. Good to be back. Felt good to wake up with the sun shining, palm trees out. So definitely beautiful. So the Federal Reserve announced a 75 basis point rate hike, which will bring their Fed funds rate target to about 3.25%. And Fed Chair Jerome Powell was very serious in saying that we're essentially not going to pivot until we get the job done of crushing inflation. So one of the things I did as I was watching the speech is I wrote down some notable quotes from the speech. Okay, so there was about 8, I think I wrote down 8, let me see. So there's about 6 quotes that I thought were the most standout from the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell speech. And I want to sort of go through them one by one and talk about them. So we'll do that here in a minute. But for those of you who are new to the Miami streams, we are now standing in downtown Miami. And if you look over here across the water, this is Brickell Key. So Brickell Key is like its own secluded island, sort of away from downtown Miami and Brickell. But there are a ton of, I guess you can consider these ultra luxury high-rise apartments, or maybe just luxury apartments. But during the day, it's absolutely beautiful. I actually saw a massive sea turtle swimming here. So maybe one day, if I don't have to work, maybe on the weekend, we'll do a live stream during the day. But it's beautiful here, absolutely beautiful. Hey, Billy says Dolphin Zone. So the Dolphin Zone is usually over near the FTX Arena, which is a little bit ways away. We may head there tomorrow. But good to see you. Hey, Julia says, hey there, I'm so glad you're in Miami. I miss Miami so much. I live in filthy Manhattan. Well, you could always just come and visit Miami. You know, it's only about, 2 hour and 45 minute plane ride. Yeah, Golden's Dawn says Miami looks nice and clean. Yeah, it's definitely very different than Manhattan, right? And sort of that's why I like, splitting my time between New York City and Miami, because it's more of a relaxed environment. And it is extremely clean here. And I just literally don't know how they do it. There's never any trash on the ground. Everything is picture perfect. Sally is here, good to see you. Welcome. This building, or this structure that you're looking at now, is the W Hotel and Tower, which we actually may walk through the lobby of that today. And this is some sort of a weird tiki boat. Chris Beeman says, I love the smell of the Florida air. I'll give you guys one shot of Citibank or Citigroup. Hey, Charles Hong says, hello, Tom from DC. Welcome. Good to see you, Charles. So here's one of the statements that I thought was very compelling from Fed Chair Jerome Powell. One of the things that he said is that the Fed will be looking for quote unquote compelling evidence that inflation is moving down towards our 2% target. Fed Chair Jerome Powell announced that additional increases in the Fed funds rate will be appropriate with the pace, or excuse me, it will be appropriate, and the pace at which those interest rates increase will determine on new economic data and new inflation data that are coming out. And as of right now, with this 75 basis point rate hike, we are now looking at a Fed funds rate of about 3 to 3.25%, and the markets definitely did not like that. Now, I wouldn't say that the markets didn't like the rate hike. What I think the markets didn't like is the tonality and the forcefulness from what Fed Chair Jerome Powell was saying. So any sort of inclining that anybody had or any investor had on Wall Street that the Fed was going to pivot or maybe lighten their load on increasing interest rates and reducing their balance sheet, that you could pretty much, put that thought away in the closet, throw it in the garbage, whatever you want to do, because the Fed will continue to raise interest rates until inflation is killed. So here's one of the quotes that I wrote down. And this comes right from Fed Chair Jerome Powell's mouth. And he said, and I quote, "Restoring price stability will likely require maintaining a restrictive policy stance for some time into the future." So again, I'll read that and then we'll sort of unpack it. So it says, restoring price stability will likely require maintaining a restrictive policy stance for some time in the future. So what he means by a restrictive policy stance is an environment where interest rates are high. So everybody, there was this big debate on Wall Street. Let me give you guys a shot of the Aston Martin building here. This thing is going to be absolutely insane when it's finished. So there's this big debate on Wall Street that is the Fed going to pivot, or is the Fed going to cave in because the equities markets are down, employers are laying off their employees. So will the Fed say, you know what, I think enough damage has been done in this market. We are going to pivot and maybe not raise interest rates at all, or even bring interest rates down a little bit or start cutting. And with that quote that I read you guys, coming directly from the mouth of the Fed chair himself, there's a 0% chance of that happening. He said specifically that we are going to be in this environment of higher rates for quite some time. And I think that is why we saw this massive forcefulness, I would say, in terms of this sell-off. Because the reason is that a lot of tech companies, or very high beta growth stocks, or growth companies in general, do not perform well in an interest rate environment that is, I guess you could just consider it normalized, right? Or an elevated interest rate environment. And the reason for that is because we've been living in a almost delusional type world where interest rates have been continuously artificially suppressed. So the narrative in Silicon Valley and throughout all of these big tech startups has been, there's no reason to focus on profitability now. Why would we ever focus on profitability when money is so cheap? We could raise money from the private markets, from VC, without issue. And we could just go full bore on just trying to grab the lion's share of market share. So, right, it's sort of just like grow top line revenue at all costs, and we'll focus on profitability later. Well, that business model doesn't really work when interest rates are normalized, okay? Because you cannot continue to take on debt in perpetuity to service your existing debt if interest rates or the cost of capital is extremely high. So I think this is the Marriott marquee here. So this is the JW Marriott, one of the nicer hotels here in Miami. And adjacent to this is the Epic Hotel, or the Epic building, as well as the almost completed Aston Martin building, which is right here. Now, supposedly this building is supposed to glow bright white at night, sort of like how the Miami Tower looks. So I'll walk up here and I'll show you guys the Miami Tower. Hey, Davi is here. Good to see you. Ibrahim Azam says, hey, Tom, I'm here. Good to see you, Ibrahim. James Tiger says, do not fight the Fed on the way up and down. We are in a downtrend. I agree with that 100%. I agree with that 100%. Davi says, hey, Tom, what do you think about FIU for an MBA in finance? Well, I think if you want to do it, I would go for it. I personally don't have an MBA. But what I would say is, if you are currently working on Wall Street or you have a job right now, one of the things that I would do is I would have your employer pay for all of your education, right? So if you can negotiate a deal with your employer to say, okay, I'll stay with this company for 2 years if you pay for my MBA, I would try to work out a deal like that. Then I think it'd be 100% worth it. So this is the Miami Tower, or the City National Bank building. Now, supposedly, just as you see the City National Bank building right here, the Aston Martin building, when complete, which is right here, is supposed to glow just like that. Now, if that's true, that's gonna look insane, because this building is absolutely, absolutely massive. Gene says, hey Tom, good evening, how is your week going? My week is going very, very well. I hope your week is going good. But one of the things that James said in the chat is, do not fight the Fed. And I would actually tend to agree with that. And the reason why I agree with that, and I actually wrote some notes down here, and in quotes I have at the top of the notes, don't fight the Fed. Don't fight the Fed. So if you listen to like a Ray Dalio, or I would even say like a Bill Ackman, Stanley Druckenmiller, one of the number one things that they say is, obviously don't fight the trend, right? The trend is your friend. And if you look at all the major indices right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ, we are all well below our 50-day and 200-day moving averages at the same time as the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates. So you sort of have a double whammy here. So I would be very, very cognizant of not jumping into this market. But here's the second quote that I wrote down. And again, if you guys want to follow along, if you type !Fed, F-E-D in the chat, the Nightbot will drop the link to Fed Chair Jerome Powell's speech. But the second thing I wrote down is that since the June FOMC, excuse me, I'm still battling my allergies. But the second thing I wrote down here is that since June, FOMC participants have marked down their projections for economic activity, with median projections for real GDP growth standing at just 0.2% this year and 1.2% next year, well below the median estimate of the longer run normal growth rate for the economy. So Fed Chair Jerome Powell, again, is saying, number one, we're raising interest rates, and number two, what we're monitoring is that economic growth is probably going to be stagnant to maybe a teeny bit positive this year and next year. And the reason why he's saying that is he's prepping the market, and he's prepping everybody to say, look, this isn't going to come without consequence, right? In order for us to kill inflation, a couple of things are going to happen, and you need to be prepared for that. Number one, economic growth is going to be extremely slow, or maybe even negative. And number two, the unemployment rate is definitely not going to be at 3.5% anymore. You know, the unemployment rate and I would say the jobs market is still extremely white hot. You know, not a lot of boats out tonight. There's only one or two. There's always a couple really nice yachts parked here, but for some reason there's only maybe two. A beautiful view nonetheless. So I'll read that again. So Fed Chair Jerome Powell said, since the June FOMC meeting, participants have marked down their projections for economic activity, with median projections for real GDP growth standing at just 0.2% this year and a mere 1.2% next year, well below the median estimate for long-run normal growth rate. Now, many people, especially on Twitter, I was monitoring Twitter really closely today because I think it's a pretty good gauge of sentiment. And a lot of notable figures on Wall Street were saying, well, if Fed Chair Jerome Powell is forecasting and he's telling us that many of the FOMC participants are saying, hey, look, you know, this year we're probably not going to have a lot of economic growth. Next year we're probably not going to have a lot of economic growth. So if that's the case, why are you raising rates? Because as you raise rates, you're probably going to make the unemployment rate go up. And number two, you're going to exacerbate your own forecasts. And to which I say, you needed to listen to the rest of his speech because he tells you why. He tells you why. And we'll go into that in a minute. Hey, Emma is here. This is Tom. What is your camera attached to? So we are using, what's it called? A gimbal. So it's just a baseline camera. I use an iPhone 13 mini that is attached to something called gimbal. Abdullah says, Tom, I'm glad you're back in Miami. Thank you, Abdullah. We'll be here for maybe 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. Blue Crew says, good evening, Tom. It's a rainy night tonight. Well, it was raining almost all day, Blue Crew, in Miami, and thankfully it is not raining anymore. I thought we were gonna have a really wet stream, so that is good. Michelle K says, hello, Tom. So cool that you're back in Miami. Thank you so much, Michelle K. I appreciate you very much. Hey, Robert says, hey, working in Nashville today. The temperatures hit 100 degrees. Oh my gosh, summer's going out with the bang. So that's right. So Robert, today is the official last day of summer, right? I guess tomorrow is the first full day of fall. Man, insane. Jewel Mars, 2008, until recently, interest rates were near zero. It's time for a correction. All the money was going to Wall Street. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I don't think you're wrong. I think you're right. And, you know, I underlined something and I circled it. And this was, in my opinion, the most important quote that came out of Fed Chair Jerome Powell's mouth today. So if you watch his speech today and you don't pay attention to anything, this is the one thing that you need to pay attention to. And I actually wrote it down and I'd like to share that with you guys. And this sort of piggybacks on what Jewel Mar was saying in the chat. This is the W Hotel, by the way. So Fed Chair Jerome Powell said, and I quote, what we hear from people when we meet with them is that they are really, really suffering from inflation. And if we want to set ourselves up for another period of a very strong labor market in the future, we have got to get inflation behind us. I wish there was a painless way to do that. And then he says in a very, very low and demanding tone, but there isn't. Okay? And this goes back to exactly what we've been talking about on the streams, is that, look, you know, the people who are making a sizable sum of money, right? The people on Wall Street, maybe you work in tech, maybe your household income is, you know, 200,000 or higher. You know, you can afford to, I guess, struggle in a way with this type of inflationary environment. But the average person out there, especially with a couple kids, you know, going back to what Jerome Powell said, he's like, what we hear from people when we meet with them is that they are really suffering from inflation. And if we want to set ourselves up for another period of very strong growth in the labor market, we have got to get inflation under control. I wish there was a painless way to do that, but there isn't. So he's essentially telling the market, he's like, look, there's no debate here, okay? There's gonna be no pivot. There's no argument. We're getting inflation under control. And if that means that we have to, number one, crash the stock market, and number two, have unemployment go to, you know, 5%, 6%, well, that's what's going to happen. So I think that's why we had a massive, massive sell-off today, because a lot of people were still expecting a potential pivot. So to Fed Chair Jerome Powell's point, he's like, look, you know, he sort of said it without saying it. And I guess, you know, if it were me, I would have sort of said it like this. You know, ever since 2008, like Jewel Mar said, interest rates have been near zero, right? Interest rates have been artificially suppressed, and that has created inflation, right? So many people think that this inflation just started when COVID happened, and that's not true, because there's something called asset price inflation, okay? So obviously you look at the CPI, oh my gosh, oil and gas is going up. Oh my God, food is going up, rent is going up. Shelter costs are going up. Yeah, we understand that. But also, you know, before COVID, was the CPI or was inflation within the Fed's target of about 2%? Yeah, it was. It was. But look at the prices of assets. The S&P 500 has gone to Mars. The average price of a single family home is almost $500,000, right? So the people, if you look at the data and you say, okay, who owns all of these assets, right? I think it's something like the top 10% of Americans own about 90% of all the assets in the country. And that includes equities, that includes real estate, things like that. So artificially suppressed rates and easy monetary policy has only created what I like to call a two-tier society with extreme haves and extreme have-nots. So really the only people who have benefited from suppressed rates are people who really know how to navigate the financial markets well, or they already own a significant amount of assets. So if you allow inflation to continue to run at say 8.5 or 9%, yeah, maybe the top 1% or the top 2% could survive it. Maybe a slight inconvenience. But the people who are in the middle class are just gonna get culled. Like it's done, it's over. It's just, there's no coming back from that. Especially if you're living on a fixed income or something like that. Hey, Aaron is here. Says hello, Tom. Good to see you, Aaron. It's quite windy, so I do apologize for that. But this is the Miami Riverwalk, and it is very, very nice to take a walk here at night. You see all the palm trees blowing in the wind. Very beautiful here. It's fantastic. Aaron Dickey says, you're right, Tom. Good to see you, Aaron. Thank you for joining. Yeah, FredX says Miami equals cool cars, New York City equals cool buildings. I think that's a fantastic way to put it. I would agree. So this is the Cipriani here. This is, we oftentimes pass these while we are streaming in New York. And it seems like it's rather busy tonight too. Austin City Limits is here. Welcome, Austin. Good to see you. Now, one of the things that really impressed me about Miami is just how clean everything is. And funny enough, I actually got a notification on my phone, and today, to the date, marks 1 year since I've been in Miami. So I moved here literally today, last year, so it's been a year. So, so far so good. I'm really enjoying it so far. So just for some context here, we started off the stream right here. So across the river. So we just crossed the bridge. We walked all the way this way, and now we are at the other side. But if you continue to look through the water or on the other side, this is Brickell Key, which is actually its own secluded island away from Brickell and downtown Miami. And the only way to get there is by taking this bridge in the distance. I'm not sure if you guys could see it on the stream, but you got to take that bridge, and right here is that very famous Mandarin Oriental Hotel, which is also in the Deutsche Bank Towers in New York City. FredX says, love the palm trees, clean streets, cool cars, beautiful people. Miami is definitely growing on me. Yeah, I think it's definitely the best of both worlds. I love it here. People are nice. Aaron says, which do you like the most, New York City or Miami? I think I like Miami during the winter months. But I would say I probably like maybe New York a little bit better during the spring and in the summer. Well, check out this airplane taking off from Miami International. Nice. So this building that we're looking at straight ahead of us is the Aston Martin building. And once this is complete, this is supposed to glow bright white every single night. This is gonna look insane. I'm not sure how people are even gonna be able to sleep if the entire building is lit up. But I guess as the months go by and when it's complete, we'll be able to see it. We'll be able to figure it out. Andy is here, says, hey, good to see you, Andy, joining us from South Korea. It's good to see you. So, yeah, I mean, going back to what, I think that was the quote of the the whole speech. So if you could just ignore the entire thing, yes, we got a 75 basis point rate hike. We understand that. We know it. Great. But what was more important is the quote that I just read from Fed Chair Jerome Powell, essentially saying, right, to sort of paraphrase, is that, look, we've had this easy money environment for too long, and this has benefited the top 10 to top 1% in America. And when we talk to the average middle class or the lower class income person in America, what they're telling us is this inflation is absolutely killing us, okay? It is not sustainable for food prices, energy prices, shelter prices to go up by 9% a year every year. It just can't happen. It would absolutely cull the middle class. So in order for, if we think 10 years out, okay, think 10 years out. Don't think where the market's going to be in 2 or 3 years. Think where the United States, the health of the US economy is going to be 10 years from now. Do you think it's going to be a lot healthier with inflation back to the 2% target that the Fed wants it, or to continue to run at 8.5%, have the Fed pivot? Yeah, equities may go up a little bit, but then you're just going to have a complete lopsided society, even more lopsided than it is right now, of the rich just getting runaway wealth and nobody being able to afford anything. Because a lot of people in the United States, especially our retirees, and if we think back to some of the live streams that we did 2 weeks ago, what was sort of the main theme there? Well, the fastest growing population group in the United States is people that are 80 plus, and after that, people who are 60 plus. And the vast majority of those individuals will live on a fixed income, either Social Security or living off their retirement savings in their 401ks, their IRAs, and the like. So if we continue to have this inflation blast those people, that could lead to, not being over dramatic here, but essentially societal collapse. So from Fed Chair Jerome Powell's point, it's, look, I wish that, he literally said, I wish there was a way for us to get back to, full employment without any consequences, but it's just not going to happen, right? So for those of you who are managing money now, for those of you, maybe you work at a hedge fund or you run money yourself for clients, where do we think equity returns are going to be if the Fed is clearly telegraphing to the market that these rates are going higher and for longer than you expect, and unemployment is probably going to go up to about 5 or 6%? Equity returns could be quite terrible for the foreseeable future. Now, assuming these rate hikes actually start to kick in and bring down inflation, well, maybe we could get it out of the way sooner and then maybe start a cutting cycle. But, the number one rule on Wall Street that all the greats like Stanley Druckenmiller, Paul Tudor Jones, Ray Dalio, the number one thing they say is, do not fight the Fed. Oh, check out this boat that's coming by. I'll try to zoom in on it for you guys. Yeah, Dub says the bond market looks really attractive now. Yeah, and that's another thing, right, that may suck a lot of money away from equities, because if you now have rates that are potentially going to be getting, let me rephrase it like this. If we get to an environment where interest rates will actually yield a real return, which we're not there, but we're getting close, what do you think people are going to want to buy? Right? Money is probably going to start to shift to the bond market. And maybe, savers will actually be rewarded for their savings. Now, one of the other things as it relates to nominal rates and real rates, Fed Chair Jerome Powell actually said this in his speech. And I think this may be maybe number 6 on the list that I wrote down here that I'd like to read. It says, we want to be at a place where real rates are positive across the entire yield curve. So I believe the question came from somebody from Bloomberg. Obviously, Fed Chair Jerome Powell takes a Q&A session. And one of the questions was, when will we know? Okay, when will we know when you will make a potential pivot on interest rate hikes to maybe either not raising them or cutting them? And one of the things that the Fed chairman said is, we want to be at a place where real rates are positive across the entire yield curve. Now, we've done many live streams about global, not just in the United States, but global negative yielding debt. So the vast majority of the debt in the entire world is negative yielding, obviously factoring in inflation. So, for example, if I was to buy a bond, you know, back in the day before all this COVID craziness, and the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield was trading at about, you know, 1.75%, but inflation is cranking at 8%. Well, I'm going to get a negative real return on that, right? So you live in a world where the vast majority of the debt is negative yielding. So Fed Chair Jerome Powell is like, look, we want to get back to a place where the majority of the yield curve, right? So if you look at the yield curve, wants to be positive, obviously after inflation. And we are a long ways away from that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we stay in this environment of heightened rates and very tight monetary policy well into 2025. Yeah, Mike C says, is positive real rates across the yield curve even possible in this day and age? And I think that's a good question, right? And I think, Mike, to your point, that is why the market had such a horrible reaction to the speech tonight. And I was talking to one of my friends. Oh, look at this. I think it's someone's birthday, maybe. This is a really cool restaurant. It's sort of like an indoor-outdoor type dining situation right on the water. Beautiful. But I was talking to one of my friends, and I'm like, look, everybody knew there was going to be a 75 basis point rate hike. The market already knew that. What the market didn't know, potentially, is how long are these interest rates, or how long is the Federal Reserve going to raise interest rates, and how long are they going to keep them there? And I think we got our answer today. Every single thing that came out of Fed Chair Jerome Powell's mouth was extremely hawkish. And essentially, you know, I have to give him credit for this. He came to terms with the American people and said, look, if we want to get inflation down, there's going to be pain. The labor market is not going to be as tight as it is. You're going to see some loosening in the labor market. Unemployment is going to go up. But we have to do something about inflation because, again, going back to the number one quote that I wrote down from the speech, is he said, look, all of the people who we're talking to, right, as in the FOMC committee, everybody that they're talking to says inflation is really putting a hurt on us, okay? And yeah, maybe the bankers on Wall Street, maybe all the Silicon Valley tech bros that are making a very good salary, yeah, maybe they can have the ability to survive in an environment where prices are going up 9% a year. The average American can't do that, okay? Going back to what I was saying before, especially if you live on a fixed income. Let's say if you have a couple kids. You know, let's say if you budgeted and you are diligent and you said, okay, my grocery bill for the month, I'm gonna keep it around $400, okay? And in order to buy those same amount of groceries, oh, look at this dog. And in order to buy those same amount of groceries next year, well, instead of spending $400, you're probably gonna have to spend $450. Now, here's the problem. Your salary didn't go up. Yeah, wages may have gone up 2% a year, but with inflation going up 9% a year, you actually took a pay cut, not a pay raise. So I think Fed Chair Jerome Powell realizes that and is just starting to come to terms with the American people about it now. Yeah, Wendy England says the average Joe is hurting. Zozo Bob says, is inflation really an issue though? People are still spending like crazy. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you look at a restaurant like this, and even the restaurants in New York, restaurants seem pretty packed. I mean, this one, it's a Wednesday night. And I only see a couple empty tables here. But one of the things I would say to that is, yeah, people are still spending like crazy. And I would like to direct this back to that Stanley Druckenmiller interview. And here's the reason why. Now, one of the things Stan Druckenmiller said is, due to all of the Trump bucks and the Biden bucks and the government stimulus checks, Americans in general have roughly $2 trillion in wealth saved. So it may take some time in order for that wealth to erode and people to stop their spending spree. Also, going back to what we were talking about before, a lot of this spending is coming from the upper middle class and the wealthy. Wow, look at this. This is really, really nice. I think this is the same restaurant, but just the indoor part. I think most of that spending is coming from the top, upper middle class Americans to the top 1%. Now, we do live streams around New York City and Miami, and we tend to do them, around Midtown Manhattan, as well as, let's say, Brickell or something like that. And those tend to be more of, let's say, just high rent district places. And those places are very, very busy. Now, if you look at the demographics of those people, they tend to, probably have a higher average income, higher household income. So I think, again, we're just seeing that very lopsided economy. But to your point, I actually think somebody from Reuters asked that exact question to Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. Oh, this is Bank of America, by the way, for those of you who are not familiar with the Miami streams. Beautiful amongst the palm trees. Julia M says, I think people are living off of the low interest rate credit cards, the ones that are 0% for like a year and a half, year and a half, and then purchases balance transfers. Ooh. Yeah, so that's another thing. So Julia, I think you do have a good point. I think there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal, it may have been an opinion piece, I forget, but I'm gonna try to dig it up, where they said the buy now, pay later craze is really, really picking up here. And that more specifically, there's more people using buy now, pay later than ever before for groceries. So I'm gonna make it a point after the live stream to go back and find that article, but that's a very concerning piece of news. People are using those buy now, pay later programs for necessities like groceries. Usually you would use that for like an electronics purchase or something like that, but that's a good point. Another thing that to sort of piggyback off of your point, I'm glad you brought that up. Credit cards are usually very, very, I like to call that bad debt, right? I believe that there's good debt and I believe that there is bad debt.
Yes, sir.
Now, credit...
bad debt and good debt.
Yes, there we go. That's a nice guy. And so credit cards the interest rates on them could be extremely egregiously high. And especially now that, I would say for people who are paying off their balances on their cards, I think that's fine, right? If you want to, put everyday purchases on your cards and get the points or whatever, I think that's fine. But people who are carrying balances here, I think they may be in for a rude awakening, right? Because as the Federal Reserve adjusts the Fed funds rate, the interest rates on those cards are also going to go up, right? So if you're holding, a $20,000 balance or something, right, just to give an example on one of those cards, and the Fed continues to raise rates, well, the interest rate on your card is probably going to go up too. Oh, Rachel says, Tom, the buy now, pay later is also very common in Brazil. Is it really? I didn't know that. Thank you for that. So what would you say is the most common buy now, pay later company in Brazil, would you say? Dan Zhang says, Tom, isn't Goldman in some sort of trouble because of the Apple credit cards that they provide? I'm not too sure. I mean, the only thing that I heard, Dan, in relation to the retail side of the house at Goldman Sachs. So Goldman Sachs is an investment bank, right? They very, very seldom deal with retail clients, right? So for example, Bank of America has an investment banking arm, but they also have a retail banking arm. But Goldman Sachs historically has only been in the investment banking realm, which means it's not like you're going to walk across the street and, you know, go into a Citibank branch like this, right? Goldman Sachs is an investment bank. But recently, and I think this was about 5 years ago or something, Dan, they started to break into the retail banking world with something called Marcus by Goldman Sachs. I believe that's what the company is called. Or it's like an online bank that they're trying to attract market share for retail customers, and it's been a big money loser. So maybe that's what you're referring to. But Goldman Sachs is very, very profitable, obviously, in their investment banking arm. They make a lot of money on fees, underwriting fees. But Marcus by Goldman Sachs has been really, really horrible, and they've been losing a lot of money on that deal. Blues Writer says, Tom, that $2 trillion in excess wealth was created out of thin air from non-existent quantitative easing paper. Powell must resign. Oh, must rein that back in, or we're all screwed. Yeah, I think that's what he intends to do, right? And I think that's what he was very stern in saying today, is that there's going to be no pivot, and I think that's why the market had its very, very harsh sell-off, and I think we could stay at these depressed levels for some time. But I think you're right, Blues Writer. So this is one of my favorite buildings actually in Miami, this church right here. Now I think they were actually petitioning to take it down to build some mega, super tall, like high-rise skyscraper, but thankfully they didn't do that. But it is adjacent to the Icon Brickell or the W Hotel. Dan Zhang says, wow, Tom, the S&P 500 E-mini is down 1% after hours. Yeah, and we were down about 2%. We closed the day down 2%, and now I guess Dan says futures are still getting clocked, getting hit pretty hard. So another thing I wanted to bring up, Dan, check out the Dixie right now. Look at the dollar. I mean, the dollar absolutely took off like insanity today. I think we closed at about 112 on the Dixie. And this is also going to be a very, very important trend to watch, because as interest rates go up, a lot of emerging market countries that have dollar-denominated debt, it's going to be near impossible for them to service their existing dollar-denominated debt. And if you think about what that means, right? Let's say if you're an emerging market country, or you're a company in an emerging market that has a lot of debt that's denominated in dollars. Well, as your national currency gets less purchasing power as it relates to the dollar, well, it's going to be increasingly harder for you to service your debts. Well, those existing debts are going to get a lot more expensive. So if you are a country, emerging market country, you know, you may need to cut back on critical infrastructure spending, critical healthcare spending, in order to reallocate even more money just to service your dollar-denominated debt. So there was a really, really good piece this weekend in the Wall Street Journal that was sort of outlining that if there ever was this sort of black swan event, as they like to call it, it'll probably start within an emerging market. Now, the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, is already all over this, and they may need to come in here and bail out some countries. So we'll keep our eye on it, but the dollar strength is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Hey, San Miguel is here. Good to see you, San Miguel. Yeah, so really quick, I want to take a pause. All of our viewers in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, I hope you guys are safe. There was a massive, massive hurricane, Fiona, that ripped through the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. So hopefully you guys are safe. I know that Puerto Rico, the entire island, was without power. So hopefully power will be back on soon and that everybody is safe. Hey, Stephen Gary Gravy is here. It says, hello from Toronto, Tom. Canadian dollar closed at 74 cents today. Lowest in 2 years. Yeah, and I was watching the action in the currency markets, and I would say towards the latter half or the later half of Fed Chair Jerome Powell's speech, as he started to do his Q&A, dollar took off. I mean, dollar really took off here. And I think one of the reasons for that is, you know, why would you be in, well, let me just put it this way. One of the reasons why we're seeing dollar strength is due to the Fed, right? Interest rates going up are going to make U.S. debt a lot more attractive. And one of the goals of the Federal Reserve, so one of the things that the FOMC committee said is there may come a time where we may sort of ease up on raising interest rates and maybe even lower them, but we would want to see almost the entire yield curve have positive yielding debt. Now, a lot of the debt, or most of the debt around the world, is negative yielding after inflation. So obviously in the United States, oh, check out the Metro Mover here. Obviously, in the United States, we're running at about an 8.5% inflation clip, and U.S. Treasuries are yielding well less than that. So you're essentially accepting a negative real return. So one of the, I guess, the criterias for the Fed is we would like to see an environment where the majority of the yield curve is positive yielding, factoring in after inflation. So. Hey, the Mighty Bull, good to see you. So now we are headed into the Brickell area. Dan Zhang, good question. So Dan says, Tom, what are your thoughts on the Bank of Japan being the only central bank that didn't raise rates this week? It's shocking that they kept their rate negative for this long. Well, I think we're supposed to hear from the BOJ on Friday, aren't we? I think we are going to get their updated stance on monetary policy Friday. And I think, you know, to your point, here's another Metro Mover. Another thing that I think about that is, I think that's why the Japanese yen is absolutely getting pummeled versus the dollar, right? Because you have investors out there following this trend that it's not only the Federal Reserve that's raising rates, it's the ECB. We were just talking about the ECB with Christine Lagarde. We were talking about the central bank over there in Canada that actually decided to raise interest rates by 100 basis points and then followed it up with a 75 basis point rate hike. So investors are paying attention to this and they're saying, okay, central banks around the world, not only the Fed, are raising rates, but Japan is an anomaly here. And they're actually continuing to cut rates. Oh, check out this Tesla here. This is a very unique color. It's like a bright red. They're actually looking to cut monetary policy extremely lax. And I think that's why the Japanese yen is getting punished here. But I don't know, what do you think about that? Hey, Q-Biz is here. This is Who's Playing Music. So that guy, I walked to get Chipotle today, and this guy was standing on the corner here playing the trumpet, and then he migrated over there. So he's been at that thing for like 10 hours, maybe more. Hey, Derek is here. Says hello, Zozo. Bob Carbon says saludos. Good to see you. Wendy England says Vancouver has one of those, except it is bigger and it's called the SkyTrain. Really? I never knew that. I want to check that out. Mike C says, Tom, did you see the Jeffrey Gunlock interview on CNBC? I didn't. Could you post it in the chat or post it in the Discord? I'd love to check that out. But what did he say? If you could paraphrase it for us, I would like to know. So this is called the Shops at Brickell City Center. And it's very unique because this is sort of like an indoor/outdoor mall for those of you who are not familiar with the Miami live streams. Yeah, NMB 045 says Japan has to keep rates low. They've always had anemic growth because of their shrinking population. Yeah, that's a major point. I think you're right, NMB 045. So this is unique. Hey, Billy is here. Good to see you. Hey, Ricardo 305 says, Tom, you should do a live video in Coral Gables. I will definitely try to get there. You know, my office, the WeWork office that I work from is down here, so it's a little bit easier for me to stream here, but maybe on the weekends we'll head out to Coral Gables. I know the University of Miami is there. So this is a very notable coffee shop, which is also in Brooklyn. I actually think we did a live stream last week walking past this place. So Wynwood is what I was telling you guys about in New York City. Wynwood is sort of like the Brooklyn of Miami. A lot of hipsters there, up and coming neighborhood. Maybe we'll have to do a live stream there soon. But here's all of the koi fish in here. All right, so here's quote number 3 that I wrote down from Fed Chair Jerome Powell. So he said, and I quote, "The labor market remains extremely tight with unemployment at a 50-year low. Job vacancies are at historical highs and wage growth is elevated." So he's summarizing the fact that even though we have had a series of interest rate hikes, so this year so far, they've raised rates 3%. So by raising rates 3%, we are still dealing with all those problems and we still see no material change. So in order to make an impact, sort of what he's insinuating, where do you think rates are gonna go? They're probably gonna go higher. So there's gonna be no pivot. Another thing he said, he's like, reducing inflation is likely to require a sustained period of below trend growth, and there very likely will be softening of labor market conditions. So Fed Chair Jerome Powell is telling us that his policies of interest rates rising and the balance sheet shrinking. So obviously that Fed balance sheet is made up of mortgage-backed securities and US Treasuries. He's telling us it's going to lead towards anemic economic growth. So next year, I think the consensus is that GDP growth will be right around 1%. I think if you look all the way in the distance, you'll see a really crazy heat lightning storm. So economic growth will be right around 1%. And usually when GDP is up, gross domestic product is positive in the United States, so do follow the returns of the equity market, or the S&P 500, or the NASDAQ, and the like. So he's telegraphing to everybody, he's like, look, reducing inflation is likely to require a sustained period of below trend economic growth. And right now, he does not see inflation materially coming down. So it's very possible that we see the equity markets having negative real returns at least till 2025, right? At least to 2025. And the reason why I say 2025 is because he says his projections that if we continue to raise rates inflation should come down to 2% by Q3 of 2025. So I don't know, what do you guys think? Should we continue to not fight the Fed and just sort of sit back and chill, being that all the major indices are well below their 50 and 200-day moving averages, and the majority of Wall Street analysts are actually revising down their earnings estimates for S&P 500 companies next year? So you have earnings down, you have interest rates up. I think the best thing to do if you're an active fund manager is just to chill. Is just to sit back, as Jesse Livermore would say, and maybe go fishing. Jay says, damn, the future sounds so bright. Hey, Gene Paul says, hey, Tom, you have not been to Lincoln Road in a while. Yeah, you know, that's true. We haven't been to Lincoln Road in a while. Maybe we'll go this weekend. Maybe we'll be live in South Beach this weekend. Hey, James Simmons is here. Says hello from Ripley, Tennessee. Good to see all of our friends from Tennessee. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Julia M says possible stagflation. Maybe. It's definitely possible. I think in order to avoid that, we may need to go full on Paul Volcker. And if anybody is familiar with our conversations on Paul Volcker, it's that in 1980, in March of 1980 to be more precise, inflation in the United States was running roughly at 14.5%. And in order to successfully kill off that inflation, what we needed to do was raise interest rates to 20%. However, in the process of raising rates 20%, unemployment went to 10%. So I think we need to be prepared for any circumstance here. James Tiger says Dow futures just broke under 30,000 in the past 30 minutes. Yeah, so James, if you guys look at a chart of the S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and the NASDAQ, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is only 500 points off the low in June. So one of the things that I've been writing about in that Behind the Street newsletter is I'm thinking that we're probably going to get a third leg down, which would mean we undercut those June lows. And the Dow is only about 500 points away from undercutting that low, to James's point. All right, if you guys are enjoying tonight's live stream, feel free to leave a like on the video and hit the subscribe button if you're new. We usually do these live streams about 5 days a week between New York City and Miami. And we'd love to have you along for the ride. This is one of those Lucid Motors, I guess you can't really call it a dealership, because I do not believe they're allowed to sell direct to consumer. I think a lot of the issues with a lot of these new EV startups is that they're battling the big dealership lobbies. So I think this is just a showroom for Lucid Motors. Mike C says, Tom, I posted the Jeffrey Gunlock interview in the Discord. Thank you for that. I'm gonna watch that tonight. I'm definitely gonna watch that tonight. Sonny D says, Tom, do you think Lucid will ever make it? I don't know. I think it's going to get a lot harder for a lot of these companies with a lot of debt now, that rates are going to go up. But I think the leader in the space is obviously Tesla. You know, there was a really good Wall Street Journal article about Rivian over the weekend. All right, team, but these two buildings right here are my favorite buildings in Brickell. They are right outside of the Burger King here, which has been here forever. But this is what you call, I guess, the mini Manhattan of Miami. This is I would consider the most popular place in the city of Miami so far right now is the Brickell neighborhood. Rachel says, Tom, you should check out Little Havana. They have amazing nightclubs, ice cream, and amazing people as well. I'm gonna have to check it out. I mean, I've spent the majority of my time only in downtown Miami and Brickell. However, I was in North Beach for a little while today, right near 72nd Street. And even North Beach is changing a ton. Tons of demolition there. Hey, Stephanie says, beautiful night in Miami tonight. Good to see you, Stephanie. Buff 20 says, Lucid is way too expensive, $150,000 for their cars. Yeah, that's insane. I mean, I think obviously the leader right now is Tesla. The thing with a lot of these EV makers is they need to get their production capacity much higher than it is in order to sort of hit what I like to call their critical mass. And I think Tesla is well on their way to do that before anybody else. You know, unfortunately, 2 months ago, there was actually a big fire in this building right here. Yeah, Gregory's like, yeah, that Burger King has on some prime real estate. Now, I think this Burger King may be gone very soon, and they're probably going to build like a super tall, mega skyscraper on it. Julius's North Beach is the best, 71st, 72nd Street in Collins. Oh my, it's my favorite place of all time. So, it's my favorite place of all time for a couple reasons. So about 5 years ago, I was looking at a piece of property on Normandy Isles, or Normandy Shores is what they call it. And at the time I was very young, you know, I just turned 20 years old. So I didn't really have a lot of capital to purchase a piece of real estate. But I remember telling myself, I even told my mom, I was like, these houses all of them will be multi-million-dollar homes. I'm like, I am so surprised that they're even allowing somebody to buy a piece of property on Normandy Isles for $450,000. I'm just like, it's just like a steal. And sure enough, if you go on Zillow right now, every single home that I was looking at in Normandy Shores and Normandy Isles in 2015 and 16, they're all well over $1 million. You can't get a home for under $1 million. So had I pulled the trigger back then, I would have made, you know, almost $600,000. But I think that just goes to show that real estate is all about the location that you buy it. Now, if anybody's familiar with Miami, I think you'll probably know what Normandy Shores is. It's sort of like its own private island with its golf course. And it's arguably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. And back in 2015, 16, you could get like a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home with sort of like an efficiency in the back that you could use for, you know, renting out or an Airbnb. For right around 500, and all of those right now are going for like 1.2, 1.3. So that's one of my favorite parts of Miami there. Yeah, Buff 20 is like, if you could turn back time, I know, dude. Yeah, but we'll see. Hey, Dante Rose is here. Hey, Dante. Says, Tom, can you do a live stream during the day talking stocks? So in all fairness, I can't do live streams during the day because I'm working. So usually right when we live stream at 8:30 at night, that's right when I'm winding down at work and sort of closing things up, and then I just sort of turn on the stream and we go. Yeah, EBITDA is great real estate until it's under sea level / underwater. Well, I think everywhere in Miami is technically under sea level. But good to see you, EBITDA. So I'll read you another thing that Fed Chair Jerome Powell said from my notes, which I think is very critical. So we already covered this a little bit, but I think it's appropriate to cover it again. So one of the things he said is, we want to be at a place where real rates are positive across the entire yield curve. So obviously right now, if you were to buy the US 10-year Treasury yield or the 10-year or US Treasury bond, the yield on that US 10-year is right at 3.5%. So you are accepting a negative return, right? Factoring in inflation. So I believe it was a reporter from Reuters came out and had asked Fed Chairman Jerome Powell a question. And he said, at what point do you think you would stop raising interest rates and maybe start to backpedal a little bit or pivot? And he said, well, you know, we really want to be at a place where we see real rates across the entire yield curve. So right now, we are nowhere near that. We are nowhere near that. And obviously, as it relates to real estate specifically, I think it's going to take a couple quarters for the full effect of rate hikes to start to hit valuations of property values. And I think it will start to hit valuations of property. I think you're going to start to see real estate decline. And the reason why I'm bringing up real estate is because 33% of the CPI, so about a third, is shelter costs. And if you think about shelter costs, one of the calculations, I should say, that goes into that shelter cost calculation is not just rent prices. Okay, one of the ways that they calculate it is for people who own their residences or their existing dwelling, how much would the rent cost, assuming they would rent their existing dwelling, right? So if you own a home, and instead of you owning that home, if you were to rent that home, how much rent would you be paying? And that amount, pretty much across the board, especially in cities like New York, Miami, all the major cities, it is egregiously expensive. So unless real estate values come down, I think you're going to see core CPI elevated for an extended period, which may mean in Q1 or Q2 of 2023, we could see a 4.5% to 5% Fed funds rate. Would not surprise me. And that would absolutely wreak havoc on the equity market for sure. Mike C says Elizabeth Warren wasted no time today, being a big critic of Powell. Yeah, I mean, I saw that too. I saw that she tweeted something, but at the end of the day, Elizabeth Warren is supposed to be for the working people, right? Is supposed to be for the little guy. And where I think she's making a slight miscalculation here, and I say this respectfully, right? I really don't think that Elizabeth Warren has like malicious intent. I don't think that. The miscalculation here is going back to what we were talking about when I wrote down and I shared with you all the most important quote from that FOMC speech. And I'll read that quote for you right now. So Fed Chair said, what we hear from people when we meet with them is that inflation is making a big dent in their lives. And if we ever want to set ourselves up for an environment where we have a sustained and growing labor market, we are going to need to get inflation behind us. I wish there were a possible way to do that without any pain, but there isn't. So again, I wish there was a way to do that without any pain, but there isn't. So yeah, it's all well and good if we have quantitative easing forever. You know, the stock market may go up in perpetuity, but who owns all the equities? Who owns all this real estate? It's not the working class guy, okay? It's not the guy who's donating to Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, right? These are the people that, you know, are institutional clients of banks, okay, that make maybe a $250,000 household income. Those are the people that can probably survive in an environment where inflation is running at 8.5%. If you live on a fixed income, like many of Elizabeth Warren's supporters do, you can't live. In 3 years, you will be wiped out. You will be gone in 3 years. And inflation continues to print at 9%. You guys know I'm an optimist. What I would say to Elizabeth Warren is, look, you have to sacrifice something. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So if that means, 2 or 3 years of higher than normal unemployment in order to get inflation down, well, I would bite the bullet and suffer lackadaisical economic growth for a couple of years, so people don't have to keep spending, $5 for a gallon of gas, or $7 for a dozen eggs, or something like that. So I think that's where her miscalculation is. And look, I actually take a very different point of view on this than many money managers on Wall Street. Many people think that Fed Chair Jerome Powell is tightening too much and he's going to destroy the economy. But what would you rather do? Not raise interest rates at all and have inflation just still run wild? There's no guarantee that inflation will come down even with rates going higher. There's no guarantee. So I think at the end of the day, it's just very simple to say that, I wonder if this is, I don't think this is a Metro Mover station. I think this is something else. Is this the Bright Line? I forget. Maybe for any, no, this is the Metro Mover. So I think this is the Metro Mover station. And this may be, I don't even know what this is. I think this may be the Bright Line or something else, but we'll see. Yeah, I don't know, but that's what I would say. I think long term, I'm extremely, extremely bullish on the prospects of the United States. There's always going to be innovation. There's always going to be new companies that go public. People that are A-class entrepreneurs from all over the world, they want to start their businesses here, right? And that's going to happen in perpetuity. But I think we just need to get this inflation genie back in the bottle, and that may take 2 years to get inflation back down to 2%. But I think the politicians need to start thinking more of, people in the middle class, right? If your grocery bill inflates 10% a year, it's just not sustainable. And I think we need to get that back down. Now, granted, I understand fully that a lot of this inflation has been caused by massive disruptions in supply chain. I get that. But at the end of the day, there's no guarantee that those supply chains heal in time, that there doesn't need to be any third-party force such as the Federal Reserve acting here to get inflation under control. There's no guarantee that those supply chains will heal fast enough to delay additional rate hikes. So, Gene says that was the Metro Rail station. Just the guy says, what about if supply chain issues sort themselves out and inflation falls faster than expectations? Yeah, I think that would be great. In a perfect world, that would be great. But one of the things, as we've been talking about this Q2 earnings season, on almost every single earnings call, almost every C-level executive has been saying, the zero COVID policies abroad have been wreaking a lot of havoc on our, demand planning and supply chains. If you're just going to shut down a factory in China and much of our production, our manufacturing facilities are located there, well, how can we account for that? That's just going to happen in perpetuity. And I think that's why you're starting to see a reorganization of a lot of supply chains. We saw Apple moving a lot of their iPad productivity to India. A lot of the semiconductor manufacturers and fabricators are starting to really make big investments in the United States and in Europe. But that's all going to take some time, right? I think a lot of these semiconductor companies that are building these facilities, you know, it's not just like you could flip a switch and you're at full production capacity. You know, a lot of these factories may be built and may be ready for production in 2025, which means maybe 2026, 2027, they're ramped up and ready to go at 100%. So, but I think you make a good point. This is my favorite restaurant here. This is Argentine food or Argentinian. I'm not sure which one to say, but this is a fantastic one. Buff 20 says if oil rises, more inflation problems. Wendy England says gas prices in Vancouver just went up again. So Wendy, are you talking about natural gas or are you talking about like gasoline that you put in your car, or both? Hey Estelle, it's the same thing here in Australia. Petrol is going up October 1st, end of tax revenue. Good to see you, Estelle. So Estelle is joining us from Australia. Always a pleasure to have you here, Estelle, on this beautiful night in Brickell. Well, I guess technically this is Mary Brickell Village, you could say. Wendy England says car gasoline, okay. But once again, everybody, if you want to listen to the Fed chair speech at the conclusion of the FOMC meeting, if you type !Fed, the F-E-D, in the chat, the Nightbot will drop the link to Fed Chair Jerome Powell's speech. Wow, so Buff 20 says both, Tom, they are predicting that energy will be way up for the winter. Yeah, I know that the Nord Stream pipeline is going to wreak a lot of havoc on Europe, Germany, and the like. But supposedly, again, and a lot of you probably know a lot more about this than I do. They're putting procedures in place now to sort of prevent any drastic price hikes. But I guess that's to be seen. So we'll see. Hey, Iris Lou says, what is happening in the market today? Well, definitely a lot of volatility. I mean, we have global bond yields across the board higher. We have the US dollar extremely, extremely strong. And we have equities lower. So that seems to be the story on Wall Street. So supposedly they're going to completely redevelop Mary Brickell Village. So anything that you see here that isn't a massive high rise, so anything over here near the Starbucks, as well as this to the left of the Moxies, is going to be completely redeveloped. There's going to be massive megatall skyscrapers here. So it's going to be interesting to see the skyline of Mary Brickell Village evolve. And supposedly it'll look just like this. Hey, Penelope is here. Good to see you, Penelope. Joe says, Tom, what's your favorite place in Florida? So my favorite place in Florida is a place called Normandy Isles, or Normandy Shores. That is by far my favorite place. Also North Beach, 72nd Street. If you ever visit Miami, here's a tip for you. If you want to go to the beach where it's really, really nice and there's almost no people, don't go to South Beach, go to North Beach. It's 72nd Street and it's actually a free trolley. So you don't have to pay anything to get there. It's free transportation. You don't need to take the bus. You can take the trolley. You can get anywhere. It's very, very residential, no tourists. And the beaches are super clean. So that is what I would recommend. And that's 72nd Street and Collins Avenue. You could also come here too, but you know, Brickell is rather expensive. This is the Chipotle I went to eat at today. But Brickell is very nice, but it is very, very expensive. It's sort of the same thing as Manhattan. Hey, Penelope is joining us. Good to see you, Penelope. Zozo Bob's Tom, South Beach is for tourists. The rest of Miami goes north of it. Yeah, Zozo Bob, what do you think about Sunny Isles Beach too? So another very, very good beach is Sunny Isles. And I actually believe that is where the Bentley Tower is going up. You know, there's this weird theme here in Miami where a lot of these mega tall residences are being named after like luxury car companies. So in downtown Miami, we have the Aston Martin building. And in Sunny Isles Beach, we have the Bentley Tower and residences. Here's the Equinox. Hey, Ollie, Jades, Tom, I love Sunny Isles. So that's where I don't live in Sunny Isles. I live up that way. So if you cross the Intercoastal, is it called? Or the Causeway? I don't know. That's sort of where I'm at. Yeah, Alex, it's kind of sad actually. Hopefully they incorporate some mixed use and more green spaces in Brickell Village. I think that'd be a good idea. You know, what I'd like to see is, so going back, so there's the college I went to, is called John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And if you Google that, John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and go to Google Images, one of the things that they did, and we'll head back down to downtown Miami, I gotta catch the bus. But one of the things that they did is they built a mega tall skyscraper for the college. But there's something that's called the Jaywalk, where it's almost like an outdoor park. And it was actually originally supposed to be a soccer field. It's hard to explain, you gotta Google it. So hopefully they'll do that here in Miami. But this is the SLX Residences. It's sort of like a luxury tower. Deep Value Alex is the Porsche Design Tower as well. Yeah, so I think that's already built, is it? I think we did one live stream at Sunny Isles. So they have the Porsche Design Tower, to your point. Then there's gonna be the Bentley building, the Aston Martin buildings down here. Seems like a growing trend. Hey, Rare Jewels says, how are you? I'm doing good. We just took a quick walk through Brickell, or Brickell Village. And now we are going to be headed back to downtown Miami, which we should have some nice views as well. So there was a New York Post article that came out, everybody, that says in August there was a record number, even eclipsing the number of since the pandemic, of people that live in New York relocating to Florida. Did anybody see that New York Post article? Supposedly there was more licenses, so like New York driver's licenses converted to Florida driver's licenses in August than ever before, even eclipsing the pandemic. That surprised, that really shocked me. But as I was reading the article, it actually kind of made sense, and it sort of goes with what we've been seeing on these live streams. So after the pandemic, now I know a lot of you will be like, oh, the pandemic's not over. I get it, but it's pretty much over. After the pandemic, right, a lot of people started to move back in droves to New York City. Now, I was in New York City throughout the entirety of the pandemic, and there was nobody on the streets. Now, if you guys have been following this live stream since then, you would agree. We would be live streaming and there'd be nobody on the streets. But now there's a ton of people on the streets, which is good. It's actually good news. We want people to be coming back. But a lot of the people who have been coming back are under the age of 30. Or as the article said, about like 35 and below. which actually makes sense. I've been seeing a lot of younger individuals in New York City, and a lot of people that have been leaving New York permanently have been people over the age of 35 with small children. Oops, sorry about that. This guy calls me every night. Hold on, we will, I'll give it a second. There's this guy who every day without fail lights my phone up at the same time. And okay, I'll give you a quick story about this guy. I'll give you a quick story. Actually, I can't. All right, so anyway, I think he stopped. So what the article was saying, and it sort of makes sense, is that the vast majority of people who are leaving are people who are married with kids because of quality of life issues, right? And I've been sort of outspoken about this. I try to be an extreme optimist. I love New York City. It's the best place on earth. You can't compare it. I love New York. I'll never leave. I want to live my life between New York City and Miami. It's just without comparison, they're the two best places on earth. But if I had a kid, I would not raise my kid in the city. You know, I try to avoid a lot of the craziness on the live stream, but you know, there are needles on the ground near Penn Station. There's, you know, people that are strung out, overdosing on heroin, and it's just, it's not something I would want like a kid to see. You know, if you're partying and you're a young professional in your 20s, you know, that stuff really doesn't faze you too much because the city's rocking, it's a good time, you're hanging out at the bars and all the restaurants. But once you start to mature a little bit and you have kids, you really don't want your kids to be around that kind of stuff with all the crime. So in that aspect, I kind of do see where the article was coming from, that the city has attracted a ton of younger people that are trying to, you know, really make it, right? You know, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. But a lot of the people who've been moving out are more established in their careers. Maybe they have kids and they're moving out due to quality of life issues, which I guess made sense. Maria says, survey conducted among young university students who drive ICE. Tesla is the most desired car. Hey, Maria, that's a good piece of advice. I mean, that's a good piece of data there. I would agree. If somebody asked me if you had to get a car, I would get a Tesla. I'm not a big car guy. Now, I think this is one of those BMWs, isn't it? These electric BMWs. Dan Zank says, unless your kid goes to Stuyvesant High School. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. I think it's more along the lines of like people with little kids, right? Because if you have a little kid, let's say 5 to 6 years old, and the two parents are working, you're gonna have to get a nanny. That could cost, you know, 50 grand. I know some people in New York that spend their budgets are just so ridiculous that it's like, dude, you can't continue your life this way. Hey, Deep Value, Alex says, Tom, California to Florida, 18%. New York, 12%. License swap January, April. 21. Wow. That's crazy. Let me read some of the comments. Give me a sec. Hey, Quinn says, I am enjoying your stream as usual, Tom. It is wise to make choices based upon one's lifestyle. Yeah, and I definitely agree, and I never really thought about it from that perspective. Because many people just like to, you know, use I think people thinking, I'm trying to figure out how to word my thoughts here. Many people always think this or that, but it can be and, right? Some people think, oh, Miami, Florida, or New York City. The way my brain is wired, I'm like, no, I want it to be Miami, Florida, and New York City. I don't want to just choose one place to live. These places are freaking amazing. I want both, right? But I think many people can get caught up in that debate where it's, oh, Miami's the best and then New York sucks, or New York is the best and Miami sucks. I think they may be doing that to fuel their own cognitive biases. But the way I think, I'm like, look, these places are both phenomenal. I'm gonna figure out a way to live in both places. But for people like me, I don't have kids, right? So maybe I don't know what it's like to worry about my, middle schooler taking the subway. I don't have those worries, right? So, yeah, I mean, to your point, I think it's, good to make decisions based upon your personal experiences, and I haven't really been exposed to that one. Hey, Troy 1995, what's up? Aaron says that makes sense, Tom. It's great that you can live both places. Jimmy says, I thought Boston was neat too. But the winters are cold. Yeah, Boston, I don't know about Boston. My brother lives there, but hey, speaking of Miami, we got the one and only Action Kid in the channel. Good to see you, AK, on this FOMC day. This is Tom. I get asked Miami versus Florida all the time on the channel. Lots of people don't think and or personal choices. Yeah, that's true. I think that's probably the number one question, right? That you probably get asked, Miami versus New York City. I think they both have their pros and cons. Well, look at all the traffic backed up here. The drawbridge must be going up, and I think it's just starting to rain. Whenever this drawbridge goes up, look at the traffic, insane. Stretches all the way down past 7th Street, and I think it just let up now. Yeah, Buff 21, that's a good point too. So Buff 21 says, Tom, people have to put down roots. Not everybody can do what you do. Enjoy both while you can. That's a very good point. Very good perspective on that. And I think it's, it's exactly sort of what the way the New York Post article was worded, that, a lot of the return of people to New York, are working professionals. They want to, try to go make it big, which I respect. And the vast majority of people that are leaving are younger families with young kids. But then again, that may just be normal, right? It may not just be because, things are getting so expensive. If I had, 2 kids, would I want to raise them in a small, crowded New York City apartment? Or would I want to go to the suburbs like New Jersey or, Long Island or upstate New York or Florida? I don't know. Maybe people are different, but again, I don't have kids. I would imagine kids are super rambunctious. They want to run around. And if you're in a very small apartment, that may be hard to accomplish. It's just starting to rain here. But team, if you are enjoying the live stream so far tonight, feel free to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We usually go live around 5 days a week between New York City and Miami. Let's see if we can find some shelter here. I think I have my umbrella in my backpack. Wow, look at the rain coming down now. This is really, really crazy. Hey, Valentina L says, have you traveled the world? How can you be sure that New York and Miami are the best cities? Well, I think in the United States, right? I live in the United States. My family's from New York. So it's easier for me to, take a 2.5 hour flight from JFK to Miami than it is maybe to go to a city in Europe or something like that. So I think that's why I say that. But it's a good point. That's a really good point. Valentina, I would like to travel a lot. I would like to travel abroad, definitely. So one of the things, if you move to Miami, what you'll notice is you'll get these sort of like these hurricane force rains. And it'll do this for maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and then it'll stop. It's very strange. But it'll do this for like 45, 1 hour, and then it'll stop. Let's see if we could take shelter under here. Maybe I do have my my umbrella in my backpack. I'll have to check. Let me see. I think I may. Hey, carbon fibers, is many leaving Utah, Colorado, and moving to Oregon and Idaho. Really? I didn't know that. Yeah, check this out. Let me see if I can point the camera at the light so you guys can see just how hard it's raining. Austin City Limits is Tom, be careful with the lightning. Yeah, there was a little bit of lightning earlier. There was a lot of heat lightning during the day. Carbon fibers says the great truth is that Miami and New York City rains more than Seattle. No way. There's no way. Yeah, Warwalker says Tom can stop by the weed bus. So to be fair, Warwalker, I don't think it's a weed bus. I think it's one of those vape buses. I'm not sure if it's actual weed. Manshu says, what do Miami locals do during the rainy months? Are there any indoor activities? Well, I guess you could go to like Brickell City Center, but I'm not really too sure. The thing about the rain in Miami though is it'll rain for 45 minutes like crazy. Like you probably can't even walk outside. A little bit like it is now. And then it'll be like clear. The sun will come out and it'll be like it never even rained. It's really bizarre. When I first sort of moved down here, I wasn't used to that at all, because usually in New York, if it's a rainy day, it's gonna be a crap day all day. Here, it could be hurricane force winds, rain, and then in 45 minutes, it's sunny again. It's very strange. I don't know why that happens, but Dan Zhang says, Tom, where's the best nightclub area in Miami? I'm not even too sure. I'm not a big club guy. I don't go to clubs, but if I had to guess, just out of a fluke, I don't know. I'd probably say either somewhere in Brickell. I'd say somewhere in Brickell, or I don't know, maybe South Beach. But I don't really go to the clubs. I'm not a big club guy. Not really a big partier, but supposedly from what I hear, that's where a lot of people, or that's why a lot of people move here, is for that sort of party scene. But Dan, could we get a quick check on futures? Because I think 20 minutes ago, you guys said that the S&P E-mini futures were down about 1%. So you never know, we could slice through the June lows rather quickly. I think the Dow Jones Industrial Average is about 500 points off the June low. Three T3 says the worst storms in Florida are about 30 to 15 minutes. Those are the ones you got to watch out for, yeah. True. For some reason, it smells really good though. I don't know why. So we are next to the Capitol Grill, which is actually right on, well, adjacent to Wall Street, the New York Stock Exchange. San Miguel. He's like, don't get wet, Tom. The flu still exists. Well, I think getting soaking wet in Miami is a lot different than getting soaking wet in New York. Because in New York, it can be like 40 degrees, nasty rain. Here, it actually kind of feels nice. Oh, look at these boats coming over the water here, or coming under the bridge here. Dan. So everything's down almost 1% across the board. I just wiped the camera. Lotus Blues, his software engineering degree is harsh. I want to quit. Well, that's a pretty good sign that you probably shouldn't quit. That's like the best sign that you shouldn't quit. Usually when you want to throw in the towel, that's like the moment that if you persevere through, you're going to have a big break. It's like that every time. I don't know why, but it's always like that. All right, we made it back over to downtown Miami. No, deep value Alex is Tom. Were you in Miami for the June storm flooding? I wasn't. I was actually in New York. I actually missed that. So team, just a quick review of tonight's live stream as we come up to the bus stop here. Today was a big day on Wall Street. Obviously, the Federal Reserve raised interest rates by 75 basis points. But what was more important than that was sort of the forward guidance, I guess you could call it, that Fed Chair Jerome Powell gave in relation to monetary policy. And consensus was that the Fed will not pivot. So if anybody had the idea that the Federal Reserve may pivot and either lower interest rates, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen. So we went through 6 of the top quotes that I believe came out of the speech that Fed Chair Jerome Powell said. Those are the top 6 things that you need to take into consideration when formulating your investment thesis. Okay, so the number one thing that I would say in conclusion is that don't fight the Fed in this environment. Okay, we had a very, very bad reaction to the speech. I think that the market was expecting 75 basis points as it relates to a rate hike. What I don't think the market was expecting is just how hawkish Fed Chair Jerome Powell came off. We are probably going to be living in this high interest rate environment for some time. Okay, that means corporate profits are probably going to come down here. We're going to have to see as earnings season rolls through. Here in about the next 30 days, we will be once again starting earnings season. But if you guys enjoyed tonight's live stream, feel free to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new. We do these live streams about 5 days a week between New York City and Miami, Florida. We'd love to have you guys along for the ride. So thank you for joining this very rainy live stream here in Miami. I wish you guys a fantastic Thursday. It's already the middle of the week. We are headed into the tail end of the week. Finish strong. We'll be back live at 8:30 Eastern time, where we'll be talking about the Bank of Japan. So we are going to hear from the Bank of Japan on Friday. We'll see if they pivot. Bank of Japan has been the only major central bank out here that's actually been keeping up quantitative easing as the rest of the world enters quantitative tightening. So Gigi NYC, thank you so much. Buff20, I appreciate you. Joan, Natalie, thank you. War Walker, Mike C, all of our moderators, DWG. Mike C, thank you. Devin, Joe, Carbon Fiber, Destructionist, Sam, San Miguel, all of our viewers in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, please stay safe. Hopefully you are not too much affected by the storm. And to the Mighty Bull, have a good night wherever you are, because there's always a bull market somewhere. You just need to know where to look. We'll see you guys right back here tomorrow, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. Hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Finish strong. Have a great Thursday. See you tomorrow.